For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for more updates.
This is StratNewsGlobal. I'm Amitabh. Revi. Today we are discussing with Seema Sirohi her new book, Friends with Benefits, the India-U.S. story. Seema, thanks so much for your time and welcome back to India after a bit.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted that you've read the book.
It was a wonderful read, just getting everything in one place and lots of things that, of course, your readers won't know about. So let me start at the beginning of the book where you start, which is, I think, late 80s is when you went to Washington, and you're talking about this event in 1991, which kind of puts a spotlight on where India and the US were. It was a general dynamics scenario.
Exactly.
Without revealing too much to the readers, could you just tell us, because that kind of, I think, encapsulates where India and US were. And that was a story that you broke.
Right. So it was one of the first major stories I broke. It was a war scenario built by General Dynamics, and it was completely, showed India as the enemy, kind of. And it created a furor when I wrote about it in the Telegraph, the paper that I was the Washington correspondent for. And it became a huge issue. The State Department and the White House, they all, denounced it, and they said the story is wrong.
Even our embassy and ambassador.
The ambassador also. But factually, the story was absolutely correct. And I had the documents from that briefing. So that kind of showed where the relationship was. It was not in the best of spots. The US thought India was more of a headache, on every issue. India was kind of on the opposite side. And there were a lot of arguments and issues that were not sorted out.
And again, without revealing too much, this scenario envisaged at the end, humbling India, I think, with 190 missiles, which General Dynamics was trying to sell at that point in time. So that was then. Now, if we cut to now, it's 2023, your thoughts on the change, the huge change that has happened gradually and not linearly?
It's a very dramatic change. For example, I landed up in Washington in 1998. If you were to tell me that India and the US will be talking on almost every major issue and cooperating on in so many areas, I would have not believed it. So that is the dramatic change that has happened over the past 30 odd years. Both countries have become more friendly to each other. The geopolitics has a lot to do with it. The whole environment has changed. So if I were to say, the Americans have also changed a lot from their very unipolar, arrogant space that they occupied once upon a time after having defeated the Soviet Union. They are in a different space.
And this change that you're talking about, geopolitics, of course, you write a lot about it in terms of how the US has changed. One major factor is China's behavior, right?
Yes, the rise of China is the main factor, I would say, which has made the US recalculate just about everything. Now, they are trying to almost decouple and from the Chinese, economy, and restrict some tech transfers to China, the microchips and things like that. The Americans have finally woken up that China is a rival, not a friend.
This wakening up of America, and I presume I'm referring to policy, administration, capital, not so much the American people. Has America realized that it and the West was responsible to a large measure for China where it is now and what it's doing?
Well, if maybe on background,
Okay.
but they will never say so in public or admit it. But I saw that happen during Bill Clinton's time when he was president. They were selling everything to China. Anything China wanted, the Americans were willing to sell. It was all about US corporates making money. National security was kind of in the background almost. So it's actually with American help the Chinese have become so powerful, especially in the tech sector.
And the convergences that you see from divergence to convergence in terms of India and the US, again, the major factor is China.
There I would say China perhaps is a major factor for the Americans, but for India there are many other factors. The people to people, the Indian diaspora is such an integral part, an important part of American society. Indian Americans are at the top positions almost everywhere. Then there's things that we need as India from the US to develop. So for us there are many more factors to be friends with the US. China is a major factor now as of 2020. If India had any doubts, those are gone.
Completely?
I would say to the extent that India hesitated in about the Quad, the grouping of India, US, Japan and Australia, that hesitation is much less now.
You're right about the hesitation of history and how that has been overcome to a large extent. But I still see a strand of policy makers, policy analysts who are suspicious about the US or are not willing to trust the US completely, considering its behavior in the past. I mean, the thought probably is, what if American and Chinese interests again align at some point in the future?
So no country should trust any other country completely, right? Because no two countries' national interests will align completely. So India will try to get the best for its national interests, and in that America plays a role. India wants a multipolar world. I don't know if the Americans necessarily want that. The reality right now is more kind of a bipolar situation, right? With the US leading one camp and the other side being led by China. But that's not, according to what Indian policymakers say, that's not something India wants. India wants a multipolar world because it gives India maximum space.
What India wants, and you've highlighted it all through the book in terms of our other neighbor, which is Pakistan, and the Pakistan-China nexus, and the way they were treated and the way India was treated. You mentioned how China was getting technology and stealing technology, American as well.
Right.
But there was no question of sanctioning either China or Pakistan when, the big daddies of nuclear proliferation, so as to speak, while we have been facing that, whether it's the nuclear tests, whether it's missiles.
Right, because Pakistan was in the American camp and the Americans were fighting the Soviets in Afghanistan, so their geopolitical interests were, Pakistan played a role for them. India, for them, was a troublemaker, so to say.
Imagine.
Yeah. And, when it came to sanctions and the nuclear nexus between Pakistan and China, the Americans winked and nodded all throughout the 80s, and they knew the Pakistanis were building a bomb. It is US intelligence that gathered all the information. Then you had the AQ Khan network, and he was selling nuclear technology to whoever had the money. So,
and again, since we're talking about the nuclear deal and how big a deal the nuclear deal between India and the US was, how do you see it now? Because the Americans would obviously have wanted more reactors, nuclear reactors, which didn't happen. But for India, there's been a lot of progression in the nuclear field in terms of whether it's the NSG, the other groups that we've got access to because of the deal, right?
No question that the nuclear deal was one of the most seminal things for India to have happened, and the US made it happen. Without the US, it wouldn't have happened. The Russians could have done it, Chinese wouldn't have done it. So, having said that, yes, in terms of what the Americans expected from India, there is a sense of, shall I say, disappointment that we didn't buy their planes, we didn't buy nuclear reactors. There are many, many reasons why we didn't. But the bottom line is that India didn't buy the nuclear reactors. So yes, there is disappointment. But as far as India is concerned, I think we got a very good deal. India is now a member of at least 3 of the 4 groups, the missile technology regime, the Wassenaar group, Australia group, and things like that. Only NSG we are not a member because Chinese are blocking it.
Again, coming back to that was, I think, an interesting caption to when you were talking about the 123 for 126, I think you're referring to the 123 agreement and the 126 planes that were, but neither happened for the Americans.
For the Americans, it didn't happen. You remember the mega contract. It was at that time when it was first floated, it was the largest defense contract. And the Americans were very hopeful that their planes or one of their planes would get selected, but it didn't happen.
When you're talking about Pakistan, it's interesting you started your analysis by saying Pakistan was in the US camp. Now, in terms of terrorism, again, we've seen the same kind of American behavior towards Pakistan because they needed them and they were leaving Afghanistan. Now they need them if they need to be in the region. How do you see the US-Pakistan relationship in terms of terrorism and how India has been trying to tell the world that it emanates from across the border?
The Americans know where everything emanates. They have all the intelligence they need. But somehow and that the Pakistanis and the ISI killed so many of their soldiers during the Afghanistan war. With roadside bombs and the chemicals were coming from Pakistani factories. We know that for a fact. But somehow they're unable to declare or do not want to declare Pakistan as a state sponsor of terrorism. Even though every major terrorist incident in the world has some sort of Pakistani stamp somewhere, whether it's the manpower, whether it's money, whether it's planning, exactly. So
personnel.
Now, I mean, they are less and less enamored of the Pakistanis, but once again, they feel they need some connections to Pakistan because it's a nuclear weapons state. They don't want Pakistan to be completely, set it adrift. They want to have relations with Pakistan, if nothing else, to monitor what's happening there with the nuclear weapons and jihadism on the rise, etc. And I think that's, the Indian government is pretty okay with that. Because even the Indian government wouldn't want Pakistan to be completely in the Chinese camp, unregulated, unmonitored, unwatched by satellites and things like that. So,
in terms of America, since you're talking about India understanding America's position, the reverse of that, does America, the administration, this capital understand our position on the Russia-Ukraine war now?
More and more. It didn't start out that way. As you know, when the war started, they were all full of moral outrage because India didn't condemn Russia and was kind of neutral. So then I think Indian diplomacy and the foreign ministers' very strong views and well-articulated views, I think made a difference. The Americans are much more understanding in all the statements they make now. They understand that India has a very old relationship with Russia. We are dependent for defense. needs and spare parts and things like that. So, but that's on the surface, in the public statements they make. What they feel inside is more complex. They are not happy with India's position. They want, they are like, you're with us or against us kind of people at the end of the day. And it's very hard for them to see that other countries may not see their point of view.
Again, when America looks at India's legacy buying of defense equipment from Russia and a legacy relationship and some kind of understanding, like you're saying, the view on the other side is, I mean, if you want us, it's not going to happen overnight. It has, what, we have over $20 billion of
$20
defense.
billion worth of American equipment.
So why does, if America wants us to wean ourselves away from Russia, why does it not give us the technology we want and the way we want it, which is to make it in India or technology transfers? Now that's it.
I know, we want everything and then some, and not give anything in return. No, that's how every country operates. So the Americans have a lot of complicated rules and laws about defense equipment sales. If they sell a plane, they want to monitor everything, and repairs have to be done by, by the U.S. teams and things like that. But they are trying, but don't forget, their bureaucracy is humongous. To change any rules or change a law takes a lot of effort. Now, how much time the Biden administration is willing to spend on fixing these things is anybody's guess. Right now, their primary focus is the Ukraine war and how to help Ukraine win the war. So,
if that is the primary focus, but again, publicly and in policy, Americans still say that the Indo-Pacific and China is one of their great priorities. So, how does America view the movement in the Quad?
So, the press release is that they can walk and chew gum at the same time. They can deal with the Ukraine war, also deal with China, etc., etc. But there is a raging debate in Washington these days about whether the U.S. has the equipment and has the readiness, shall we say, if China were to invade Taiwan, can the U.S. do something? The weapons that they have sent to Ukraine, in order to replace those, even for themselves, is going to take a couple of years, if not more. So there is a debate that let the Europeans fight or help Ukraine. The Americans should focus on China. But the Biden administration has gone to such an extent to help Ukraine that I think they're not ready to come back. There are murmurings about peace talks, but nothing tangible.
Again, just going back to particularly a book, and all through 30 plus years, there have been personalities on both sides of the fence. I know we don't have enough time to go through all of them, but some who just come to your mind on both sides of the fence, whether it's from the White House or even lower officials who've made a huge difference, or the other way around.
Right. So I would say from the Indian side, the couple of ambassadors stand out. Ambassador Naresh Chandra, Ambassador Ronan Sen. Naresh Chandra was there during the 1998 nuclear tests, and that all hell broke loose at that time. And Ronan Sen was there when the nuclear deal was happening. So both were extremely important personalities, and they did an amazing job. On the US side, I would say Strobe Talbot to some extent, But
with the Talbot Jaswant Singh talks?
With the Talbot Jaswant Singh talks, and he was ready to, you know, engage India significantly for the first time on, or one of the first times on strategic issues, and they had many rounds of meetings. On the negative side, I guess Robin Rafel in the U.S., she was kind of a very negative influence on the relationship, because she was Bill Clinton's Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia, and she questioned the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India. I mean, you don't do that. And she was, I think she was freelancing, because a lot of the people in the State Department, they walked the whole thing back. And they had to bend over backwards to sort of fix it. But she was quite fearless, and some people say that she had the blessing of Bill Clinton, because she was a friend, a personal friend of Bill Clinton when they were in Oxford. She was with someone who was a roommate of Bill Clinton. Both were Rhodes Scholars, and so that's why she became Assistant Secretary.
You mentioned in passing the Indian diaspora, which is now what, 4 million?
4 million, yes.
In your book also, you kind of delineate the curves that they have been there in terms of influencing, whether it's capital or the administration. There was a time when they were criticized a lot in comparison to, say, the Pakistanis.
Right, right.
How do you see the Indian diaspora now?
It's politically much more mature than it was at that time in the 80s and 90s, but it still has a long way to go. For example, there's no one Indian organization of Indian Americans that encompasses all communities, you know, Gujaratis, Tamils, Telugus, everybody. No. Everybody has their separate organization, and the umbrella organizations are very sort of not very effective. So when there is an issue like the nuclear deal, they had to be kind of you know, organized, and the Indian diplomats had to work really hard with them, and some of them rose to the occasion. Some were very significant. A couple of them got Padma Shris and things for their contribution. So yes, it's like Indians like to compare themselves to the Jewish lobby in the U.S., but it's very far from there.
Completely.
Yeah.
And then Seema, I mean, what, you've looked at 30 plus years of when you were there firsthand in terms of reportage, analysis, observation. 30 years hence, where do you see India and the US, say, it's 2023 and 2050?
You know, crystal ball gazing is very tough.
True.
I have no idea. I'm just
the trajectory, maybe.
a simple old journalist who analyzes what's going on. I would say the trajectory is positive. So I think we'll be better and better friends, but everything depends on what happens in Asia. What China does, what India does in, you know, reaction to what China does, I can only make a guess. But I think US-India relations are there to stay and should get stronger and stronger, if for no reason other than the community, the people-to-people bridge that is there. Every year, you know, so many people come here, then so many people go from here, students.
Yep, and it's increasing all the time.
Exactly.
Post-COVID, hopefully.
Right.
Once all the visa issues get sorted out.
And the Quad has these scholarships they started where about 100 students from all four Quad countries will study STEM subjects in the US.
Sure. Seema Sirohi, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you in person after a lot of online discussions we've done, and of course reading this book. This is ready to pre-order, right? And it will get, you can get your hands on it, I think, on the 19th.
Yes, but it's there for pre-order on Amazon.com IN.
So if you want to look at the last 30 years first-hand or inside view from Washington, D.C., and of course, Seema has all her contacts back home in India as well, this is the book that you probably want to pick up this year. Thanks again, Seema, so much.
Thank you
Pleasure.
so much for having me. Thank you.
And to our viewers, do send us feedback on this kind of subjects and the experts that you would like. You can, of course, see a scroll at the bottom of your screens. That's our Telegram channel, which you can join to get the latest updates that we put up on our website or our YouTube channel. This is StratNewsGlobal. I'm Amitabh, Revi.